Hey, listen, welcome back to You Wear It Well, Dress Code Policies for the Workplace Part 2. Remember, I told you if you watched Part 1, I had some other information that I wanted to share with you guys in regards to workplace dress policies, and I didn't want to leave anything out. So we're back. We're back. I'm so glad to be back with you. Again, I'm Stephanie Lomax, President and CEO and your HR strategist for HR or with HR Pro for You, our HR consulting firm, and your video podcast host for HR in the Dark, where we expose the dark corners and the dark side of human resources in this world we live in today. So I wanted to address two other very specific workplace dress code, grooming, policies and issues that are extremely prevalent in today's workforce. The first is the ban on hairstyles and specifically dreadlocks, and what the law has said about that. You might actually be really, really surprised. I certainly was. And the second one is about gender neutral dress code policies and a specific court case. They both have specific court cases, but this particular court case, what happened to the gentleman who was doing things off duty and how that affected his job with a major supermarket chain here in the United States. So let's first talk about just kind of recapping a little bit with dress code policies for the workplace. In part one, we talked about how dress code policies could not violate EEOC Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They cannot create any type of harassing situation. They cannot retaliate against an employee. They have to be accommodated if the request is made, once it's made known. They cannot create job segregation, meaning you can't say, oh, well, because you are wearing a head wrap, we're not going to allow you to be able to interact with customers. That's considered job segregation. And the last thing is that it cannot create disparate impact or disparate treatment based on religion. So someone can get promoted if they don't wear the dress code policy or they don't follow the dress code policy, but that dress code policy violates a religious belief. Women wearing pants, for example, could be a religious scenario, or not wearing pants could be a religious scenario. So, or some type of a headgear or something like that. So we just wanted to kind of recap that, but then I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and talk a little more candidly about things that cross some very sensitive lines and sensitive barriers as it relates to religion and, as it relates to race and gender. So back in 2000, a young lady by the name of Chastity Jones was offered a position with a company by the name of Catastrophe Management Solutions. They were based out of Mobile, Alabama. And she was provided, she went through the interview process, she was given an offer of employment, but that offer of employment was contingent upon her cutting her dreadlocks. Specifically, she was told, and Chastity Jones is an African-American woman, she was specifically told by the human resources manager, who happened to be a Caucasian female, that they tend to get messy. And so she would need to cut her dreads if the offer was going to stand. She did not cut her dreads as a contingency of employment, and therefore the offer was rescinded as a result. Specifically, the manager said that it violated company policy. However, a deeper look into the company policy actually stated, and it said, I'm reading here, it violated company policy, but the company policy only stated that hairstyles must reflect business professional image and they may not be excessive. So I'm not really sure what Catastrophe Management Solutions take is on business professional image being represented and excessiveness in terms of dreadlocks, but clearly they felt some kind of way about it. They rescinded the offer. This was back in 2000. So I would venture to say, it was 18 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long ago. It feels like we just went into the year 2000. But back in 2000, things we would say were probably not as progressive as they are in 2018. However, sad to report that Chastity has been fighting against this since 2000 and just recently was struck another blow because she's been fighting it through the court and the legal system. She's gone through appellate courts and through other district courts, and the Supreme Court basically refused to hear the case because they said, and I quote, the district court said, it is a mutable characteristic and the civil rights law only applies to unalterable traits such as race and gender. So the question begs, is the ban on dreadlocks and hairstyles in general, regardless of whether they are particularly associated with one ethnic group versus another, is a ban on those types of hairstyles legally sound? The court is saying, yes, they are legally sound. But are they fair? They're not fair. And I'm saying that they're not fair. What's my opinion? Probably so. Other people's opinion too? Probably so. But I think that in general, we as a society and organizations, when they're hiring people, I mean, we are the melting pot of the world. Every type of individual lives here in the United States. And so I really think that as an employer, we need to think long and hard about what it is we're saying to people and what image we as an organization are portraying to people when we rescind their job offer based on a hairstyle that is not something that is detrimental to the organization. Maybe they felt that it was, I don't know, can't really speak for them. That's not what they said in the legal proceedings, but the court has upheld that. And it's kind of unfortunate that she's been fighting through this since 2000 and has basically now been denied it being heard again. So will we see this turn up again somewhere down the road by someone else? Probably so. Will the courts overturn it? Will there be some other evidence that they hear that makes them change their mind? Who really knows? Bottom line is, I think we just need to be a little more sensitive to people and their choices, particularly when it doesn't have an immediate impact or an immediate reflection on the organization in general. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was about transgender and gender identity. Clearly in the news, there have been multiple incidents of where individuals go to use the bathroom if they're transgender, or if they are in the midst of the transition, where do they go? There have bathroom signs have changed. There have been fights in the schools about what to do with that and how to handle those kind of scenarios. And even in the workplace, obviously, there have been there's been a lot of controversy and conversation around how to handle transgender individuals and those that are identifying as a different gender than what they were born. And so in general, I will say that policies related to workplace dress need to be gender neutral. What do I mean by that? That means that you cannot state in your handbook that your dress code policies is that men wear pants and women wear dresses and skirts. Because whose decision is that really? Ultimately, the employee's decision. And if someone identifies as a different gender, they should be able to dress accordingly to that gender, as long as it is fitting within the context of the gender neutral workplace dress code policies. What should an employer generally do? They need to ditch the stereotypes, quite honestly, around all of this, because we're hiring individuals and we're hiring them as their individual self, and we are hiring them because they're able to do a job and have the skill sets to carry out the responsibilities that they were hired to do. How they dress, how they identify, how they wear their hair, whether they have earring piercings or nose piercings or tattoos, if they have pink stripes in their hair, I mean, really, does that really matter? I guess to a certain degree, there needs to be some conversation generally around it, but do we need to make employment decisions based on these types of things? I think we should probably ease up a little bit on that and treat people as the individuals that they are, regardless of how they identify, regardless of how they wear their hair, regardless of what their religion says they need to wear or what their disability is requiring them to wear temporarily. Regardless of all of those things, we're hiring people, and we need to treat people with such respect as that. The case I want to talk to you about specifically in regards to gender identity is a gentleman by the name of Peter Euler, who was a 20-year employee, truck driver for Winn-Dixie, which is a very large supermarket chain, mainly towards the southern region of the United States, maybe starting somewhere in the Virginia area. And this particular incident happened in Louisiana. Peter worked for Winn-Dixie for 20 years, had a stellar performance record, arrived on time, did his job, didn't ruffle feathers. All around, just everyone said that Peter was a great guy, and not just a great guy, but he was an excellent worker with no track record of any type of issues. What got Peter fired in 2000, believe it or not, same year as Chastity Jones' case, what got him fired in 2000 was the fact that people found out that off duty, he preferred to wear women's clothes. His family was fine with it because they went places with him. They went to dinner with him dressed as a woman. They went to church dressed as a woman. They went out and shopping sprees and outings. Nobody in his family seemed to have an issue with it. But his employer, where he came to work dressed as Peter, had an issue with the fact that when he was not at work, he was dressed as Donna, who was the persona he identified with when he was outside of work. And they fired him for that reason. He took it to the court, and unfortunately for Peter, they declined. They sided with Winn-Dixie because they said that there was no type of sex discrimination that was taking place, and he was filing a sex discrimination suit. And so the case was dropped. He decided not to pursue it any further, and now is a truck driver for another organization. So his decision, fine, not to pursue it, no issue there. But what happened to Winn-Dixie as a result of it was they had a ridiculous amount of turnover that occurred as a result. They had very low morale in their workplace. They had other lawsuits that came out as a result of that. And they just had a great deal of negative publicity because other employees who either had the same type of gender identity as Peter and did what Peter did outside of work, or that had some other type of issue that they felt if the company found out about it, they too would be fired. They had to deal with all of that. And so it just was a huge blowback. And I'm not really sure for what. Their concern was that someone may see him out in the community and know that he works for Winn-Dixie, and somehow that would shed a negative light on Winn-Dixie. Yeah, I don't know if I really believe that or not. But in any case, that is what happened. And again, to that, I would say, I think we as a society need to ease off of some of these things and let people be people. Do you need to have workplace rules and policies in place? Of course you do. Do they need to be so stringent as to tell people how they're supposed to dress, even when they're identifying as something else, or even when they feel that it's an expression of their personality, that's a hairstyle or what have you? Do we need to do that? Probably not. Just my opinion. I'm not the end all be all of it, certainly, but working in human resources, I advise clients to just be mindful of the image that you want to portray when you decide to make an employment decision based on workplace dress code policies, grooming policies, etc. Let's think through it and make sure we're doing the right thing and we're doing it the right way, and then we're not doing it for a reason that we feel is going to be damaging to our credibility, our image, etc., when it really has nothing to do with that. It's about personal opinion. So those are my tips. This is part 2. So glad I was able to get this out to you. Thank you for joining me as always for HR in the Dark. If you are not a subscribed podcaster to this podcast, I encourage you to please do so by going to HRPro, the number 4, YOU.com/podcast, where you can see this part 2. You can also see part 1, and you can see all the other episodes that have been provided to you since January of this year, in directly there on the website, and you can subscribe from there as well and get other information delivered to your inbox as a result of being a subscriber to the podcast. Thank you again so much for your time. I'm excited to have brought this to you, and I look forward to seeing you next month, where we're going to be talking about the Friday, Monday slick day and whether that has to do with Family Medical Leave Act or not. How do we handle that? We'll talk about it then. See you guys then.